Hey, it's Greg Stanley. Do you know you can now win prizes such as a Starbucks gift card, Concours tickets, or car swag for being the first to answer an entertaining trivia question? Get the weekly trivia question by following me on Instagram or Facebook at the Collector Car Podcast and just DM me your answer. The first person with the correct answer wins. Also, as a new aspect of my automotive passion and hobby, I am a car specialist consultant for RM Sotheby's. If you need assistance consigning a collector car at Amelia Island, Pebble Beach, Auburn, West Palm, or Hershey, email me directly at gstanley@rmsotheby's.com.
This is the Collector Car Podcast, the home for the auto enthusiast. Join Greg Stanley as he applies over 25 years of insights and analytical experience to the collector car market. He will interview the experts and throw in some fun stuff as well.
Welcome to the Collector Car Podcast. Hey, it's Greg Stanley. Before we get started, I have some really cool news. I'd like to thank all of my guests and my listeners as we just cracked the top 11. Actually, we're number 11 on the iTunes charts for one of the most trending automotive podcasts. So that's really exciting news. And I just wanted to put out a quick thank you to all of our listeners. So for today, we have a very special guest, Marvin Waters, who's the co-founder and president of the Sandhills Motoring Concours out there in North Carolina. So Marvin, thank you for joining us today.
Greg, it's my pleasure to be here, and congratulations on your accolades with your podcast trending ahead of some pretty big names, I see.
Yeah, that was crazy, seeing Chris Harris at number 12, which is nuts. I don't understand the data, but I'll take the data points when I can, so I appreciate your time today. I was looking at your homepage and about you and your team, and you are heavily involved in the automotive world. So what can you tell me about it? Can you give me a brief overview of your passion for cars?
Oh, I'd love to, and thanks for having me on this morning. I really appreciate your time. You know, our Sandhills Motoring Festival, and you hit it right on the head, we've got a wonderful, wonderful team, all volunteers that put on this event in the village of Pinehurst. Pinehurst is mostly known for the U.S. Open golf tournaments that they've held over the last 20 or 25 years. That event's been here 3 times, and it's headed back in 2024. But in 2013, a group led by Jay Howard started out of Charlotte, started the Pinehurst Concours d'Elegance, and they quickly established that event as one of the best and well-run concours events in the country. They had a 5-year run, and when they decided that they were not going to continue that event, we had a group of guys that had been working on events behind the scenes on the Porsche Club side, Mercedes Club side, and we got together and we thought a need for a concours and an automotive-themed weekend has really been identified by this group out of Charlotte. So we took it upon ourselves to get together and craft what really is a 3-day motoring festival, just like the name says. It's the Sandhills Motoring Festival.com if you want to have a look at it online. And we've got a group that we do an informal car show on Friday night with a North Carolina pig picking. We do a wonderful road rally on Saturday morning. We do a hangar party on Saturday night at the main hangar here in Moore County. And then on Sunday morning, we do the concours in the village, which consists this year of 16 classes of 8 cars. The village of Pinehurst closes the streets of the village for us to hold our event. We're the only group that they close the streets for the entire year, and they've never done that before. We were lucky last year when we went in front of the local authorities, and they agreed that we had a good idea and had a good an event, and they've worked with us greatly or nicely, and we're happy to have that piece in the village. And this year we're introducing the Car Club Showcase, which is another 80 cars that'll be on display on in the village as well. And this is really just to make sure that everybody that wants to be involved on that Sunday and have a car here gets that opportunity. Those are mostly car clubs that we've opened up a certain number of spots for, and then we've probably got another 35 to 40 cars that'll be on special display, non-judged, non-car club themed cars. So, Greg, this year our main sponsor, and actually the sponsor that's presenting the concours in the village, is Foreign Cars Italia from Greensboro. They're wonderful sponsors, wonderful folks to work with. Steve Sudler manages their Ferrari Challenge race team, and they've agreed to bring over 3 Challenge race cars, the race car hauler, as well as 3 or 4 Ferrari road cars. And there's a couple of exciting new Ferrari road cars coming out between now and May, and we're hoping to get one, maybe even one of the first ones in the country. But they support all 3 days of the event. We'll have the hauler and the race cars at the hangar party on Saturday night. we'll have the hauler, the street cars, and the race cars in the village for the concours on Sunday as well. Great partners and great folks to work with.
Yeah, that's really awesome. And we'll have some folks from your concours as guests in the future. And so be sure to take a listen to those when they pop up. Now, if you could you tell us a little bit about your history with automobiles and your passion? And I think you said your dad started with Corvettes, but then somehow you became involved in Porsches.
Yeah, I tell you, it all goes back to my dad with anything automotive, and he's the primary and sole reason that I developed the love of the automobile. He's 89 years old, and he still drives his 1974 Corvette that he bought new in 1973. Oh, wow. Yeah, and it's going to be a lot of fun. We've got a special display of Corvettes this year at the Motoring Festival, one each of the C1 through C8, and his is going to be the C3 that'll be on display. It's a neat car. He drove it from the day he bought it in 74 to the day he retired in 1998. And my sister and I restored it for him as a retirement gift. And it's funny. I like to joke that it's got nearly 300,000 miles on it, but it's absolutely perfect. We've researched everything with all the stickers and everything that the Corvette folks love are in place. But it's got the original Firestone 500s on it because when he bought it, he immediately bought a set of wider aluminum wheels and put those on it. So trust me, we don't drive. Those Firestone 500s were problematic from the beginning in the mid-'70s. We don't drive too far on those today. You know, it's kind of a maligned Corvette. I really think that they're finally getting their day in the sun, but none of that really matters to us. It's the car my dad bought and drove and still has, and we love showing it. We've shown it at AAC events, and he just loves it. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, and it's you know, I think probably the day and the moment that I really realized that, you know, the automobile was special was the day he took me for a ride on a back Georgia road on a trip we were on, and we saw close to 145 miles an hour. And when we were done, you know, I'm wide-eyed and couldn't believe what just happened. He looks at me and he says, "Don't tell your mother."
Right. Now, did you hold that promise? Did you not tell your mother?
Well, I did because, you know, there would have been repercussions on both sides if I had told her anything. So, yeah, I absolutely never told her that until much later. But then we talked about it quite a bit after the cat was out of the bag.
Right, yeah. Where did this exposure to classic Corvettes go in your passion for cars?
You know, we always enjoyed driving that car and showing that car, and I was fortunate in the early 90s to move with work down to Jupiter, Florida, and there's really no better car culture in the United States than South Florida. And I quickly became enamored with the Ferrari at the Cavallino Classic and joined the Porsche Club and spent time at Moroso Motorsports Park, which is now Palm Beach International Raceway, and did my first track event. And, you know, that was another light that went on that was just unbelievable. The fact that you could take a car that you drove to work and go to the racetrack and spend the day acting out your Walter Mitty fantasies and drive your car around the racetrack for an entire day or an entire weekend. That was a whole nother level of an eye-opening experience. And so I got heavily involved in track events and through the Porsche Club, and remained involved racing Porsche 944 that we built in 1995. It did 4 24-hour races at Moroso with the SCCA. I now campaign it in HSR, SVRA, and we'll do some Porsche Club racing with it as well.
Now, what was your first Porsche? Was it a 944?
It was, yeah. You know, I love the transaxle. You know, I guess at that time I really couldn't afford a Porsche 911. It's what I wanted from far back as I could remember. But I bought a 1989 944, the 2.7 liter, white with blue. That, gosh, I just loved. I drove it as my only car. I traveled in it. I tracked it. It was just a very, very special car, and it still lives on today as a Porsche Club Racing race car with the motor that I built back in the late 90s. And I think that was in 1994.
Right. Okay. Now, what cool cars or collector cars are in your garage?
Well, it's an eclectic collection. A couple of 944s. We showed my 944 Turbo at Works Reunion a few years ago, and it was super original, 86, original paint, low mileage car that we did well with there. I've still got the 944 race car, and I'm a big fan of the Boxster as well. And I've got a Boxster track car and a older 912, but there have been a handful of cars that have come and gone over the last 5, 6 years. The one that I really enjoyed was a 1991 Carrera 2, white on tan, that was just a fantastic automobile. And I've always enjoyed the 964, and that was really, really a special car. So much further evolved than the long hood cars, the SC cars, the Carrera cars, and Porsches. They get better every time they introduce a new model, and
right.
That one just really I missed that one. That's a fact. And a 75 911 Carrera that I enjoyed, that we restored and did track days with that. It was restored to emulate a 75 IROC car. My favorite is probably the E55 that I drive each and every day. It's the perfect car. It's comfortable. It's fast. It allows me to drive back and forth from Pinehurst, North Carolina, down to Jupiter, where I do work with the Wilson collection. So that's the one I drive every day.
Yeah. So if I gave you $100,000, what collector car would you buy?
Oh gosh, that's so easy. And I think about this more than I probably should. I would buy a 964 RS that they didn't import to this country. I've got parts on the shelf. I've got gold BBS race wheels ready to go on it. I'm ready to answer that question. I'm ready to buy that car. I've already got the bits and pieces that are really going to make it mine when I get it.
Wow, you didn't hesitate at all.
No, listen, I'm ready for that one for sure.
Yeah, that's really cool. Well, now, are there any recent trends in the collector car marketplace you've seen?
Well, I've got to tell you, Greg, the best thing about trends is they're trends. Nothing stays the same, and the only thing consistent about car collecting and trading in cars is it changes day to day, month to month, and year to year, which to me makes it a lot of fun. The 944 transaxle cars were really, depreciated for so long and really kind of unloved, and most didn't recognize them as real Porsches. And now they're having their sun in the day in the sun. And I'm a big fan of those cars. Thankfully, I've owned a few and own a couple now that I didn't have to pay today's prices for, and I enjoy them. The same with the 912. It was certainly an unloved Porsche for a long time, and it's having its day in the sun. So you never know, and it's really it might even be overused, but I don't think so. You buy what you love and let the market move around you. I don't really buy and sell cars for a living, certainly not. And I don't really buy a car thinking, this is going to be one that doubles or triples in value. They're kind of like tools. You buy a track car to go to the track. You buy an E55 to travel in. You buy another car because you're going to do rallies. You buy cars to show at Works Reunion and other Porsche events or any of the Concours events. So to me, they're like tools. You establish your budget. You find the car that fits the certain activity that you want to be involved in, and then you go buy the best one that you can afford.
Right.
And it's great if they go up in value, but I tell you, I think you would lose more often than not if you were simply buying them hoping that they went up in value.
Right. I totally agree with you on that one. Yeah. Well, could you talk a little bit about the Wilson collection?
Oh, gosh, I'd love to. I've been so fortunate to be involved with Larry Wilson and his collection down in Jupiter, Florida. Larry is the guy that we all want to be. He has an 18-square-foot warehouse. I think the collection right now is 85, 6, 7 cars. And Larry buys and builds and restores exactly, what he likes. And every car that he buys, he puts his touches on it. As an example, we sold a Ferrari Mondial on Bring a Trailer yesterday, and that's where I come in with Larry. I handle any marketing that we do, and I handle any sales of cars that Larry wants to move out of the collection. We certainly don't buy cars to make money. Most of the cars that we sell out of the collection are heavily modified, and that certainly isn't the way to make money in the collector car business. Larry is a racer at heart. He does show cars, but he rarely goes to the concours to show the car. That's just not his thing. He'd rather be on the racetrack, or he'd rather be restoring an old V12 Ferrari or building something that he wants. Okay, he's been primarily a Porsche guy. I think latest count is 41 911 variants in the collection.
I'm only 40 away from that.
Yeah. Me too. So don't feel bad. But he last year he bought a 1971 240Z, and it's really just a beautiful little 240Z that is all original. We in the process of putting it back together, it was taken apart and painted, but it won't be modified in any way. It'll be just like it was sold new, probably better than when it was sold new in 71 with new red paint, and that'll debut at the Motoring Festival here in May. The Wilson Collection in Florida, they restore cars. I don't know whether you're familiar with McPherson College in McPherson, Kansas. We employ 4 McPherson graduates, 7 artisans really in total at the Wilson Collection, and we not only restore cars, but we build cars from the ground up. And one that we recreated and built from the ground up is the Porsche 804. I don't care who you are, you can't have a Porsche 804. They simply don't exist. And the 804, most listeners are probably thinking I meant to say 904, is we're all familiar with the 904. The 804 was built in the early 60s. There were only 3 built by the factory. It's the car that Dan Gurney won the 1962 French Grand Prix with. It's Porsche's only Grand Prix victory to date. So Larry decided he wanted one, and the only way that you can get one is to build one. And he built it from the ground up. It's what these guys do. They can absolutely build anything in the world, and this car is spectacular. Not built to fool anybody, simply built because Larry wanted an 804, and now he has one. That long-winded description is really just leading up to me saying that car is going to be at the Motoring Festival this year. It'll be prominently featured. Friday, we'll have it in the hangar party on Saturday night, and then we'll have it, of course, on the show field on Sunday.
Yeah, that's really amazing. And I thought, wait, 804? I've never heard of an 804, so I'm glad you clarified that. And that's truly amazing that they only built 3 of them, and that was one of their only wins. That is really, really cool. Now, which car in his collection is your favorite?
Well, gosh, that is not as easy to answer as the previous question. We routinely, and Larry drives all of his cars. He's got Brabham Formula 2 cars that he still races. We took this Porsche 804 to a Cars and Coffee in West Palm Beach down from Jupiter, and a couple of times I've driven his 1972 911 ST, and for me it just ticks all the boxes. It's fast, it's comfortable for an older 911, and it doesn't have the tail on the back, which is part of the reason I like the 964 RS, but it does have essentially a turbo body on it with the wide 911 9-inch spooks on the back. It's just spectacular. So I tell you, if I had the 72 911 ST and a mid-90s 964 RS, I wouldn't need anything else.
Wow, that's amazing. That's really cool that you have it narrowed down to the exact 2 cars. Now the point is just trying to get them. So.
Well, that's narrowing them down to what you'd like to have is the easy part. We all know that.
Right. Yeah, wow. So tell me, do you have a particular car that got away from you in your pursuits of finding the best ride?
Greg, I do. And, it was a car I mentioned earlier, the 1975 911 Carrera. It was a U.S. Carrera, number 187 out of the 395 that they sent to the U.S. And I found it in the front yard of a home in Jupiter, and when I lived in South Florida. And as it turned out, it was the automobile that belonged to the son of the woman that owned the home. Sounds easy until you realize that he had moved to Alaska 10 years prior, and she rarely heard from him. So I decided I wanted the car. So for the better part of 8 months, we communicated with a letter that I would have imagined a bush pilot was dropping in a duffel bag into the wilderness in Alaska or however he gets his mail. And finally, we struck a deal. And I knew that it was a rare car, but it was an unloved 911 at the time. Nowadays, there's no such thing as an unloved 911. So I bought it, and I restored it, and I tracked it, and just loved the car. And life gets in the way sometimes. The car appreciated in value. I had my fun with it, and it was sold. It now lives in Stuttgart and went back to Germany. It paid for education for my daughter at Loyola University in Chicago. So I would truly love to have it back. Every now and then I type the VIN number in just to see what I can learn. If it ever presents itself, I would really, really like having that one back. But at the same time, it paid for education, so I only miss it so much.
Yeah, for sure. Well, now, do you have a barn find story you can share?
I don't have a barn find story, but I do have a swamp find story.
Oh, even better. We don't get those often.
Yeah, you probably don't. Last year, I was in my shop, and I got a phone call from a buddy of mine down in Stuart, Florida, and he said, hey, I'm at a barbecue, and in the back of this guy's ranch are a couple of cars that are essentially in the swamp. They're in a low area that was wet. And one was a VW Westphalia van, and the other one, based on what he could see, he said it was a white 911 coupe without a sunroof. And I said, do me a favor, go find the owner and tell him that you have someone on the phone that will buy that car.
Right.
I didn't really know what it was. I didn't know how much was left, but I did know when you find a long hood, no matter where it is or what kind of shape it's in or what might be living in it, you do everything you can to buy it. So he found the owner, and we talked, and we struck a deal, and I went down, I guess about 8 months ago, and we truly dragged it with a tractor out of the swamp in Stuart, Florida. And it's a 1968 912 California car. It's really in rough shape, but I tell you, some of the parts, a lot of the parts on the 912 are interchangeable with the 911, and some of them are just unobtainable. You can't find them. So I brought it back to North Carolina and had plans to restore it. And with my activity with tracks and with the motoring festival and with everything else, I just don't have time for it. So that car is going to go overseas here in about 2 weeks.
That's amazing that it was a swamp find. That is a first. I've never heard of that. So if you could, I don't know if you took any pictures while you're dragging it out or not. I'd love to see the pics and share them on the social media stuff when this posts. That would be really cool.
Yeah, I've got pictures and video, and it's really, really a bad-looking 912, but I love them all. That's why it was tough to answer your earlier question.
Well, I'd like to end my little podcast with a fun little game I called Keep, Cash, or Crush, or actually, and Crush. So I know you've listened to a few of my podcasts in the past. Are you ready to play?
Absolutely. Let's go.
All right. So this one, I'm trying to make it hard on you, and this one, I'm hoping I got it where it's a little bit difficult. So I'm going to pick for you as your first car a 993 Porsche Turbo S with 21 miles on it, immaculate. I don't know why I picked 21 miles, but 21 miles on it, and it's immaculate. The second car, to harken back to your childhood, a 1969 L88 Corvette that is perfect. And then the third car is a 1956 356 Carrera, but it's kind of wrecked, and it has a VW bug engine. So those are the three cars: a 56 Carrera with the wrong engine, a 69 L88 Corvette that's pristine, and a 993 Turbo S with 21 miles. Which one would you keep, cash, and crush?
Well, you'd have to. The low mileage Turbo S would have to remain a low mileage Turbo S. You wouldn't drive that, although some might argue that. I wouldn't crush any of them, man. I tell you, any car that fits into that category is a keeper in my mind. The L88, they continue to go up in value. The Carrera with the wrong motor makes a wonderful cars and coffee car. You might crush the motor and go find the proper motor, but I wouldn't even crush the motor. And I'd keep them all. I'd enjoy them. And at the end of the day, if they went up in value, you'd be a winner. But at the same time, you'd have three wonderful cars that you could drive, show, and enjoy.
So if you had to rank them 1, 2, and 3, which one would be your first choice for your collection? Which one would be your second, and then your third?
My first choice would be the Carrera with the wrong motor.
Okay.
Second choice would be the low mileage Turbo S.
See, I thought you would go that way. Yeah.
And the third choice would be the L88. tough choices to make. You were very successful making it tough. I've got a soft spot for all. I'd want to drive all three of them, and I just wouldn't be able to drive the Turbo S. So, I would probably consign that to my friend Ramsey Potts and let him sell it at the upcoming RM auction down at Amelia.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, what's the best way for our listeners to learn more about the Sandhill Motoring Festival?
Well, I tell you, if they'll go to the Sandhills Motoring Festival website, sandhillsmotoringfestival.com. It's our best tool. It's got all the information they need. I hope they'll make plans to come join us on Memorial Day weekend.
As a reminder, you can follow Marvin on Instagram and Facebook at Swift Motoring and at Sandhills Motoring Festival. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for your time today, Marvin.
Greg, thanks for your time, and good luck with your podcast. I look forward to meeting you in person.
Thanks for listening to the Collector Car Podcast. Don't forget to give us a nice rating on iTunes and be sure to follow us on Instagram and everywhere else at the Collector Car Podcast.